instead of trying to fix this project that we call Robyn and Nikki, can we meet ourselves? Which makes me want to cry. At this point in my life, can I meet myself? Can I meet all of myself, all of the parts of myself, the good, the bad, the ones that are still flying out somewhere, the ones that have acted in ways that now longer make no sense.
Yeah.
Like, why would you ever do anything like that? But it's like being able to meet ourselves and be insanely kind and caring. And can that love, that like radical, which also means rooted, can that really rooted love, could that be like the way that you take the next step forward?
Welcome to Mind, Body, Spirit, Food. I'm Nikki Sizemore, and in this podcast, we explore how food connects us and sometimes disconnects us to our minds, bodies, spirits, the earth, and our communities. This is a space dedicated to bringing more presence, intention, ease, and joy into the process of feeding ourselves. Let's dive in. Hello, my dears. Welcome back to the show. I am so thrilled that you're here. Today's conversation is one that I felt in my bones. I speak with writer, Curanderismo practitioner, and neighbor friend Robyn Moreno about healing, the kitchen, and what it means to get rooted when life feels, as Robyn's Mexica ancestors would say, slippery slick. Robyn is a renowned speaker and author of the book, Get Rooted, Reclaim Your Soul, Serenity, and Sisterhood Through the Healing Medicine of the Grandmothers. Robyn shares her cultural upbringing as a Mexican American and shares her journey from being a high-level executive to becoming a practitioner of Curanderismo, which is a form of healing that emphasizes caring for oneself and for others. We talk about how perfectionism and ambition can sneak into healing. Her comment about becoming the CEO of her healing resonated a bit too deeply, but also made me laugh out loud. And she names susto, those shocks or experiences that can get lodged in our bodies, and ser, the inner knowing that guides us back home when we get quiet enough to listen. We also explore how shifting a mindset from fixing to caring can change everything, from our inner lives to the way we make dinner. Robyn gets really honest about her journey in the kitchen, which meant for her facing a lot of grief, but also reconnecting with her lineage. Be sure to stay tuned to the end of the conversation because Robyn shares powerful tools to help us find our rooting, which I love how she distinguishes getting rooted from just happiness. Getting rooted is deeper. It's knowing the core of who we are. And she shares really simple practices that can help us find that in this slippery slickness of life. As I mentioned in the episode, I left this conversation feeling so nourished, and I hope it feeds you too. If you enjoy the conversation, please share this episode with your friends. You can post about it on social, rate it on the podcast apps. I know I say this every week, but these things really matter, especially for an ad-free podcast like this. Community support is what makes this happen. An easy way you can also support the podcast is to become a subscriber to the Mind, Body, Spirit, Food newsletter, where I dive deeper into these topics and I share brand new weekly recipes, all of which just happen to be gluten-free. If you become a paid subscriber for just a few dollars a month, you make all of this magic happen. You also get access to the full recipe archive, well over 130 recipes in there. You get bonus content, you get discounts on one-on-one sessions and more. And finally, just as a reminder, my Mind, Body, Spirit, Food cookbook is now available for pre-sale. The book comes out in January, but pre-sales are a really, really, really easy way you can support authors, and they really mean so much. So if you're interested in checking that out, I'll include a link in the show notes. Without further ado, let's get into the show. Welcome.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me, Nikki.
I am so thrilled to speak with you because here we are, in the same town. Our kids are friends, we're friends, and yet we've never really had a conversation about this stuff. Like we've had all the other conversations about the kids and all the other things.
Yeah.
And I absolutely adore your book and I adore the work that you do. So I can't wait to get into all of that. But I'm going to start by asking you the first question I ask all of my guests. And
Yeah.
that is, what is your cultural upbringing and how has that influenced your relationship to food?
Oh my goodness, that's such a good question. And it's actually weirdly changed. And I'll sort of explain that. So,
Hmm.
my cultural upbringing is Mexican American. And so, I grew up in San Antonio, Texas. So, I'm at the Hana. I grew up like in the Southwest. And I grew up in San Antonio, which always has been very like Latino dominant, you know? So, it's just like very like, I don't know. It was just part of my everyday. So,
Mm,
like, my dad would barbecue, we were also American, right? So he would like barbecue like every weekend, but also every Sunday, my mom would take me to a bakery to get Mexican breads. They call them pan dulce. So we would go and we would get what they call conchas or pan de huevo. We would get these little like gingerbread pigs. They're called like maranitos. And then we would get like tortillas, and sometimes they would get something called barbacoa, which
mm.
is a type of, I don't even know what that is. It's like
Beef,
a braised,
typically. Yeah.
yeah. And I didn't always love that. They would get lengua, and sometimes we'd have something called menudo. So it was just part of my upbringing, and it was interesting because it was also very blended within like my normal American experience. Like we went into pizza, and tacos, and it was a very like seamless transition.
Mm,
Yeah.
hmm. Were you interested in food as a kid, or was that just like not your thing?
Honestly, I mean, I liked eating it, but I was never like, oh, let me get in there and
Hmm.
let me try to do this. I actually explained this in my book. It's so interesting because I've always had trepidation in the kitchen. I
Hmm.
think I have a lot of like strong suits, but the kitchen is a place, even now, where I don't know that I can find a rhythm in there, and I get
Mm,
kind of nervous. I wrote a book called Get Rooted,
hmm.
and, part of the getting rooted was getting grounded after this sort of stressful midlife time I was going through, but it was also going back to my roots. And when I began to like ask myself, why am I not a great cook? I had to ask my mom, and she was like not a great cook. And then I had to ask about my grandma, and
Hmm.
she was not a great cook. She was orphaned. And so it just was like, oh, what is
Yeah.
the backstory of our presence in the kitchen or lack of confidence in the kitchen, and what can be repaired in the kitchen?
Yeah. I want to get there, but first I want to ask you, I kind of want to go into that journey a little bit and talk about this notion of curanderismo, which I'm sure I'm butchering the pronunciation of that, so I apologized. But let's just share a little bit about your journey and what that is and what it is that you do as a curanderismo.
So, curanderismo, it means, I guess if it was like to be translated, it means a way of healing, right? So the
Hmm.
word cura can mean to heal, right? That's the one way of it. It also means to care for as well, which is what I
Hmm.
really like. That's the definition I think I more identify with. So, curanderismo it's almost like a broad generalization of almost like folk healing, right? This,
Hmm.
like my great grandmother was what people would call a curandera, and
Curandera.
a curandera, right? And so what she was is she might be called a medicine woman, but she was a healer. She was a healer like in her neighborhood in San Antonio. And so people would go to her for a variety of things, right? And so they would go like if something happened to them and they were having like stresses, and she would like help them. She would sweep them with herbs to kind of relax them and, move energy out. So I guess she was an
Hmm.
energy worker. She was also able, people would come and she could actually kind of talk to the other side. That
Hmm.
was one thing that she did. So if people passed away, they could like converse with the deceased, which was interesting. She read cards, but she was also a body worker. It was like all of these
Wow.
practical things that she did. And that was just what people did. So I grew up understanding this. I can't speak for other cultures, but I do think across culture, we have always had these medicine women, right? These healers, these herbalists, these body workers, people that work with energy or spirit, that pray over people, that really help in that community, really alleviate pain, whether it's physical, mental, or spiritual, all
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
And it's not necessarily like you're not gonna get a PhD in this. This is often taught from, like, an aunt to someone young or a grandma or a grandpa. You can have curanderos, like, it's not gendered, it's just a role. But when we grew up, I knew my great-grandmother, which was, that was a privilege. Not everyone gets to know their great-grandmother. And I just thought she was kind of, like, weird, I think, actually. Like, I was like, "I don't know." She only spoke
Mm.
Spanish. She lived in the back of one of my great aunt's houses, and she was kind of a little, like, witchy. And
Mhm.
I was like, "I don't know about all that." But we also, the way that I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, was like, we would also, though, go see, like, a curandera. It was like this, like,
Mhm.
it wasn't that big of a deal. Like, my
Mhm.
mom, something was happening one time, I think, with her leg, and she went to the doctor, the normal doctor, and they said something, and then she was like, "I'm gonna go visit a curandero." And she went, and they, who knows, applied herbs, maybe massaged
Yeah.
it. And so it was a healing way that was familiar to us. And I think it's
Mhm.
not unfamiliar to, I think, a lot of people. I think as I got older, I tended to think that it was old fashioned, but I've always been very spiritual. I've always been kind of like seeking this path. I was a yoga teacher. I, went and did 8-day silent meditations. And it wasn't until I was firmly in the middle, like, I don't know what you would call midlife. I was like in my early to mid 40s, that I just kind of had like, I don't know, like a mental health breakdown. I was running a company that was basically dissolving. I was
Mm.
commuting, it was pre-pandemic, so I was commuting to the city 2 hours each way a day. I think at that time, my kids were both under 5. Like,
Mm.
it was just already high stress. I was drinking a lot of alcohol because I just was really stressed, and so that was, like,
Yeah.
a relief for me. It was like, I just was like, "I need to, drink." And I just felt myself really, kind of spiraling out of control, in the sense that, like, everything that I thought I could control, like, none of it.
Yeah.
And I just think something in me
Mm.
unraveled, and I
Mm.
ended up leaving my job, and I took a pause before I sort of jumped into getting another one. And I was like, something is happening, I think, on a deeper level. Like, yes, it's normal to have big stresses. We're going to continue to have stresses as we, work life balance, children, all of that. Like, the generation that we are, we take care of our parents and our kids. But this felt actually deeper. This felt like a long time coming.
Yeah.
And weirdly enough, Nikki, none of sort of the managing tools were working, right? The alcohol nor the meditation were working.
Right. Mhm.
Like, nothing was working. And I feel like I sent out this very, just unconscious mental SOS. And then I began to get all of these invitations that were centered around curanderismo. My cousin
Mm.
began to practice it. She invited us to, like, a circle. And I was like, what is all this? What's going on? Would I have to wear yoga pants? And as I
Mhm.
began to, like, read books, there's not very many books around curanderismo, but there's one that was seminal to me. It's called Woman Who Glows in the Dark. And when I read this book, I was like, oh my goodness, this is, like, I had, like, goosebumps, because
Yeah.
there was just something so familiar
Yeah.
to
Mm.
me,
Mhm.
and I was like, "Okay, let me start to walk this path. Everything is making sense."
It's so I got chills when you were telling your story because while your story is very different from mine, it's also so similar.
Mm.
And what I love is that you're emphasizing this sense of familiarity because there is that knowing. There was that knowing within you, and there certainly was that knowing within me when finally things were crumbling and the control that I had, the
Yeah.
structures I had to control everything were being pulled out and slowly dissolving.
Yeah.
There was the knowledge that the path that I maybe was supposed to take, that sounds like strong words, but I was being guided towards
Mhm.
a different path. And while I resisted it for a good long time, I also still knew that it was familiar. As crazy as it seemed, it made sense. And like the visions, the things that started to happen in my spiritual journey, they did feel like me. I felt like it was coming from elsewhere, but it also just felt like me finding home.
Mm.
One thing that I love that you say in your book and that you emphasize is that we often see like healers, the word healer has a lot of connotations and a lot of weight. And we often feel like these healers are born so special. They've obviously always knew that they were going to do this. They just have it. They don't have to try for it. And what you emphasize, and I think what often people don't see, is that if the desire is there, becoming a healer and whatever form that is for anybody, that could be a massage therapist, that could be, in any, there's going to be any way. But as long as the desire is there, these are things that can be learned. This isn't something that we just have to wake up one day and we're like, oh, now I can do this. It's actually just like anything else in life. And I think we put on these like goggles when we see people who do this kind of work, that they are somehow different from us, when in fact, we're all kind of walking the same path. Does that make sense?
Completely. No, 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 absolutely. I want to just go back to what you're talking about this idea of being called in a direction
Mm.
or, having these, like, I don't know, feelings and that you can actively ignore them, like, and
Mhm.
push them away.
Mm.
And I feel that that is really normal. So I just want to normalize that. Like, I just feel like a lot of people really do have a sense of maybe who they are, what they want, what's blocking them even. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just that sometimes it can be painful to sort of uncover some of these,
Yeah.
right? These, old wounds. That's,
Yeah.
nobody ever wants to do that. That's why for me, I stayed really busy. Like, busy ambition was a really big, like, mask for me
Me too.
because I could sort of fill these wounds, what we call a susto, with like external validation. So like the more external validation, the more like I could prove to myself that I
Yeah.
was good. It began to make sense until like it didn't make sense. And so I just want to acknowledge that anybody out there that's listening that this resonates with, whether there's like a pang in the heart or like maybe your eyes are watering, like, to trust that. Just
Hmm.
trust that. Just begin, because it's the beginning of what you said, coming home, because we do have this inherent wisdom called ser, which just that you really do know. I think society,
Yeah.
traumas, socialization, they sort of, they give us these maps of ways to be. And I followed that map. And then I got to the end of it and was like, oh, okay, now what? And so I just feel like listening to yourself is never a bad thing. When it comes to a healing path, it's funny because my grandmother walked this path. So I actually had a model for it. So I could even
Mm.
tell myself, like, well, this runs in my vein. Like, I'm of this lineage, right? Like, that could like prop me up, but it actually didn't. I actually ended up having
Mm.
sort of like Curanderismo imposter syndrome. And
Mhm.
I was like, because I was nothing like her. She was
Mm.
gifted in different ways. And when you walk this path, people say that you have the don, you have the gift, or dones, you have gifts, right? And so she had gifts. And so I kept saying, well, what are my gifts? Like, does this mean I have to go to like massage school? Does this mean I have to study herbalism? Like, it was really confusing. And I really was so happy when I had a teacher that was saying, look, like, one, we are all born with gifts, so we get to choose and cultivate what makes sense for us. But also that you can cultivate, like you can learn, right? That dones are both like born and
Yeah.
cultivated, right? And so, like,
Yeah.
for instance, I have a friend who, like, sometimes pain puts you on the path. Like, I have a
Oh,
friend
yeah.
who got this terrible breast cancer diagnosis, which was scary. Luckily, it was, it was cured, I believe, and she's fine and she's been fine
Mhm.
for a long time. But it was such a profound experience for her that she really, really completely changed her life. And now she's
Mhm.
doing something really, really different. And she works with women, she does sound healing, and she feels very called to do this because
Yeah.
her dawn is that she lived this experience, right? So our
Yes.
experiences can be our dones, good or bad, all the things that we've lived through these decades bring us that kind of singular training and how to be a human and how can we help other people. I will just say this other thing, which is, so the word curandera, and I said it before, it's a title that's really given to you. Like, I'm not going to really call myself that. That's a good
Mm.
thing for me to say.
Mhm.
It's a lifetime training,
I
right?
see.
It's a
Mhm.
lifetime training. And so for me, I call myself a curanderismo practitioner, a practitioner
Mhm.
of curanderismo. That feels way lighter, right? I feel
Yeah.
like, and when it's so funny because when I first got on this path, I'm like, Nikki, I'm a curandera. My grandma was a curandera and I'm a curandera. And that's, I think, so normal as well, because there was a level of like ownership I thought that I had to have. And it wasn't until I actually started working with people that I was like, ooh, you know what? Let's just, dial that back. But one of the
Yeah.
definitions that helped me was the cura means to heal. And can you ever really heal people? And so what I loved is that the other definition of cura means to care for. And I,
Yeah.
you know what? That I can do. I
Yeah.
can care for other people and I can continue to heal myself.
Yeah.
Because one of my teachers is like, a curandera is not necessarily someone that goes out and heals the world. It's someone that heals themselves
Mm.
and continue to be of service to the world.
Yes. Oh, there's so much here. I'm going to start not where I thought I was, but I just want to read this quote because this idea of fixing versus caring for is something I talk a lot about in terms of the kitchen. And actually, I do want to step back a little bit because, we're talking about the healing path and being a quote unquote healer, whatever that is. But as you mentioned, our life is training us for whatever it is that we end up doing along this path. And it might not be anything that you see anybody else doing. It might feel so like wonky and weird. But when you said that word, Sarah, that knowing, that impulse of like, oh, I want to learn more about this. I want to follow this. I can't stop myself from learning this. I feel like that is a good indicator that you're following the path. And sometimes it does like feel like throwing spaghetti on the wall, like you. And I was like, oh, started doing all this spiritual work. Do I need to get into herbalism? I am a cook, like that would make sense. And it's like, no, actually, that's not the thing that resonates with me. So I kind of just wanted to step back and emphasize that whatever you have been through in your life is exactly what you're supposed to meant to. It's not even those words, but this is the path that's leading you towards this moment and where you're going next, if that makes any sense, or I might be talking in circles. The other thing I want to emphasize is that so often we feel like, okay, I found this path. I feel like I have a new direction. I feel like there's this little tug that's pulling me. I'm going to keep following that. And then we immediately turn our gaze outward. My teacher often she's a shamanic practitioner. She often talks about young people who will immediately don the title shaman. And it becomes this outward need for validation in a way that feels very different from practicing these skill sets and these rituals or whatever it is that have extended back for lineages. And instead of this notion of having to dominate, or what is the word I'm looking for? Like master.
Mm-hmm.
I'm now I've mastered this, so I can take this out to the world.
Mm.
It's instead of I'm constantly learning and I'm constantly curious, and I will never have mastered anything. And that kind of takes us back to this idea of fixing versus caring. If we're caring for something, it's not an end result. It's a being in the process that becomes the thing. I talk about this with cooking all the time. Like, let's tend to our recipes and step away from this notion of, oh, I'm going to make this roast chicken and it's going to be this perfect roast chicken and it's going to make everyone happy. What about if we go into like, I'm going to tend to this chicken in the oven. And while I do so, maybe I have the opportunity to tend to myself as well, but I can care for it instead of having to control it or fix it. You have a quote in your book that I just think is going to resonate with listeners so strongly, because it certainly did for me. You said, if we could approach the messy people and places in our lives with the humble willingness to support instead of the obsessive need to fix, then we might find that the caring becomes the cure. And when I read that, I was like, oh, yes. But then also that felt so resonant for myself that if I don't have to constantly try to fix this thing that I call Nikki, I can just care for it. How much more freedom, and compassion and that just feels like such a softer way to go about the world. That was a lot I just spewed out, but I just love your thoughts on any of it.
I love that. And I love the processing and the back and forth. And, when I was on this path, right? And as I continue to be on the path, like you said, like there really is no mastery. Like
Yeah.
like there's just decades. That's why there's never going to be a PhD in curanderismo. Like,
Mhm.
like it's
Mhm.
just not. Like you're not
Mhm.
in 7 years get it, or 2 years or whatever, right? It's like an ongoing training because you also bring yourself to it, right? You're constantly
Mm.
bringing yourself to this. But I loved so much when you said that. So I guess I'll just start here. When I was on this path, I took that same obsessive energy I had with trying to run a company to then my healing.
Mm.
So I literally applied the exact same principles because that's who I
It's all
was.
you what you knew,
I
right.
can't even be mad at that version of me. Like I have so much love
Mm.
for that person that was like, okay, now I'm going to be
Yeah.
the CEO of my healing. And here's what we're going to
Yeah.
do. Okay, we're going to take it in 9 months, right? This is based on some ancient Mexica calendar I just found on Google, but that makes sense to me. It's finite. So I'm going to do it in 9 months and I'm going to do this and this, and we're going to do this. And not only am I going to fix myself, I'm going to also fix my sisters and my cousins because people around me were suffering to a great degree, right? For
Mm.
in all the different ways of getting divorces, substance use disorder, just the ways that the world, you look at
Yeah.
your family and everyone's going through it. So I had the grandiosity to think, not only will I fix myself, Nikki, I'm going to fix everyone around me.
Mm.
And we're going to do it in this amount of time and it's going to be brilliant. And none of that happened.
Mm.
Like not a, like zero, zero. And
Mm.
I didn't know what I didn't know. And I
Mhm.
needed every level of ego. I needed every level of insanity I brought to this because I wouldn't have done it probably.
Yeah, right.
This is what it's going to look like in a year. I would
Yeah.
not have done it. So I needed that person, that evolution. That's how you evolve, right? It's not me today. It was me several years ago now. She needed all of those things. And what I realized almost very quickly after telling everyone that I've discovered Curanderismo, it's going to change our life and that they too need to do this. And they basically all told me to either F off or like, or thought I was weird. Oh,
Right.
slammed the door in my face. We're not interested in my
Mm.
fixing, but I had a blueprint and I just had that massive epiphany, which is why you were affected by it, which is, and like, I love the way that you always turn it to yourself because it's true. Like we are our canvas. We are our thing. Part of me, I'll
Yeah.
just say wanting to look at other people was yet another way of avoidance,
Yes.
another giant distraction
Yes.
of me not wanting to turn the lens out all the way on myself and be like, you know what? Like, and that's what my spiritual teacher in Spanish, she said, quédate con lo tuyo. You need to stay with your own shit. And I was
Mhm.
like, whoa. And so, like, you're saying that gentle application of instead of trying to fix this project that we call Robin and Nikki, like, can we meet ourselves?
Yeah.
Can I, which makes me want to cry. At this point in my life, can I meet myself? Can I meet
Mhm.
all of myself? All of the parts of myself, the good, the bad, the ones that are still flying out somewhere, the ones that have acted in ways that now longer make no sense. Like,
Yeah.
why would you ever do anything like that? But it's like being able to meet ourselves and be like insanely kind and caring. And
Mm.
can that love, like that, like radical, which also means rooted, can that
Mm.
really rooted love, could that be like the way that you take the next step forward? And with that, I would say, yeah.
Yeah, it's so I have a podcast conversation with Megan Watterson and we were talking about this idea of emanation, like when we go in inside and do the work for ourselves first. We all hear that. You got to put your oxygen mask on first. I'm telling people all the time, like, you really need to nourish yourself first. But what does that mean? And that's so challenging. We're conditioned, particularly as women, to think that's selfish. And also the reality of being a mom, a wife, all of these labels that we hold, it is often we want to put other people before us. And yet, if we can turn that gaze inward and really, really establish that compassion that you're talking about and that care that you're talking about for all parts of ourselves, not just the ones that we're proud of in this moment, but all of the versions, then there is a natural, at least my opinion, then the healing comes naturally.
Yeah.
It's not something that has to be forced or accomplished or, controlled. It becomes a way of living in this world because you're tending to it all the time in yourself. I don't think it's something like you said, I will have to, this is a lifelong practice for me and I fuck it up all the time. But I do know how to keep coming back home. Like I
Yes.
do know how to keep coming back
Yeah.
in. And I do at this point, thankfully, have gained the compassion to
Yeah.
allow for mistakes and allow for step ups. Whereas before I would have been so hard on myself and maybe slammed some doors.
Well, and it's also like, I mean, we could take the metaphor of the kitchen, right?
Yeah.
You're like a really good chef, but like, and it sucks. Like, this is not fun. Like, this is zero fun. And it's so funny. When I wrote my book, and at the very end, the last thing I did is in the introduction, I dropped almost like this, like, I don't warning for people. I don't know if there's like a better word for it because I didn't want people to think that it's all like wine and roses, that it's also
Right.
it's a path laid out with like rose petals. You know what I mean? Like the reality of whatever we call this, like healing, remembering, coming back, retrieving our souls, like it also hurts.
Yeah.
There's a level of pain there. And also, we also kind of don't know what we don't know. Like I love that saying. And so we learn so much and I hate it. Like I hate it, but it's also so true by when we make mistakes. And so when you
Yes.
like say that you went back to you're in like a shamanic circle and I see this like people get like they take one class with Curanderismo and then they're like, I'm a curandera, and
Hmm.
I did it.
Hmm.
That was me full, like outing. That was full on me. And I had so much grace, I think by my teachers who are probably like, okay, all right, let's see how that works out for you. But what happened is very quickly, I was like, oh, I am way in over my head. It felt so much better to
Mm.
just like, okay, let me just slow my roll. But I
Yeah,
didn't know what I didn't know. Right. And so
of
we
course.
learn. And so like in the kitchen, the trouble I have in the kitchen is that I bring my perfectionism in there.
Hmm.
It's like not exactly the way that this recipe told me. If it's drier, if it's less flavorful, I get confused and annoyed and I don't want to stay with it. I want to just like
Mm.
on. And my husband in the book, he's like, just stay with it. Like, just do your pinto beans again and again. Just like
Mhm.
and I'm like, I don't like to say that's part of like my susto response. Like I want to sort of fly and move on to something else. Like it feels uncomfortable to not be a master or not control
Mm.
all sorts. Like every part of my body is like,
Yeah.
this sucks. But the staying, the coming back and staying, right? Like, okay, calm, compassion, and also like, I'm going to do it again. And my family's like, we're going to eat chicken tacos again. And I'm like, yeah, because they still suck. You know what I mean? But it is that like it is a practice. There is
Yeah.
practice of staying with it, which we're talking about, like staying with the healing, like staying with the practices, like staying with the calm, because it has to be integrated into the body. You know what
Yes.
it's
Yes.
not overnight. It's not an overnight, it's an ongoing thing.
I wanted to circle back to the kitchen because you do have a whole chapter in the book about cooking and about the kitchen, which is just I think it's such a fun chapter to read because as you're describing now, I think a lot of people be like, "Oh, the healing journey and then I found the kitchen and I just created these beautiful recipes and they connected to my ancestors and everything was beautiful and lovely." And I'm like, "No, no, 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 no. I hope nobody ever walks away from my work thinking that's what I'm implying by saying that the kitchen can be a place to connect to ourselves. The kitchen can be messy. It can be frustrating. And of course, all of the things that we bring into it bring in this level of perfectionism, which is just heightened to the nth degree by social media and all of the conditioning that we have as a culture and as women.
Yeah.
But within all of that, how has the kitchen been a place of healing for you?
Hmm.
Even though it might not be one of the tools that you love best, you still use this tool. And I don't know if you still do since writing the book. I'm curious about that.
No, I continue. And I feel like there's always lessons in it because some things, and this is with everything that we do, like some things come easier
Hmm.
and some things don't. And so we want to gravitate towards like the easier things. Like writing for me, communicating for me is like easier. The kitchen is a place that I'm always a little bit of a fish out of water, right? I
Mm.
just, again, like it's a rhythm that I'm always trying to sort of figure out, right? But what it does for me when I allow myself is I do actually connect. And even as corny as those things can sound, and you're right, it's not all beautiful. It's not like always like this sort of like, me and my grandma making tortillas, like,
Right.
moments. Like sometimes it's just madness. But when I can allow myself sometimes the space, the
Mhm.
patience, the presence for it, I think it can be healing, right? It actually can because it's sensorial, right?
Yes.
So specifically, like when I was going on this journey, there's a lot in the kitchen, right? So you'll continue to have these conversations, but just like you said, I thought like, okay, I'm going to learn how to make tortillas the way that my great grandmother made, and my life will be cured. And what I, realized really quickly was like I had to understand like why didn't I know how to cook better than I did? What happened to my mom? What happened to my mom is
Mm.
that my father died when my mother was 40 years old, and she was widowed at 40 with 4 children. And so what happened to her is that cooking became a burden to her. It wasn't fun anymore because her partner was gone. Like all the
Yeah.
stresses. Now she was a single mother. So she had to like buy all the food, make all the food, pack all the lunches, like, and it became a burden. It was a
Yes.
burden. It wasn't fun anymore. And I think that exists for a lot of
Yeah.
people. So I think we have to just acknowledge that there's a
Yeah.
lot of people where the kitchen is not so fun, right?
Yeah.
It's burdensome. It just is,
Yes.
right? And so we have to just acknowledge that right away. And what actually happened, just to stay with that thought, for me, what I realized is like, holy shit, my dad died. And what I never pieced together is that I also lost my mother too.
Mm.
Even though my mother still was alive, the kitchen, it like all of
Yeah.
the meals were gone.
Yeah.
Like we never met at the table anymore. Like it was like just, she would do her best, leave it out, had to run. Like the family unit was gone, and the kitchen metaphorically like dried up. Like there was
Mm.
no flavor, there was no spice, there was no nourishment, there was no water. And I don't want to diss my mom because she was doing her best. Like that
Of
was the
course.
absolute best she could do.
Yeah.
But it was so painful in a way that I didn't realize. And I was like, oh my God, like this susto I have is not just from my dad dying, but because it's like my mom, part of her disappeared too, and her grief and her just literally inability to be there for us. And so the kitchen no longer became warm, right? And
Mm.
Mexica as Aztec, ancestors, the Aztec Mexica, the hearth, right, was the
Yeah.
center of the home. It was the heart, right?
Yeah.
And that heart kind of died, or it was low. The fire was low, whatever metaphor we want to use. And it was very profound for me to realize that, like, I've been warning my dad this time, but I miss my mom. Like, can I
Mm.
find my way back into her through this? And so then I made a dish that she liked, that I was like, why does she like this weird ass dish? It's called capirotada, which is like Mexican bread pudding, and it has cheese and raisins and like, I don't mean to disrespect people that love capirotada. My mother loved it, and I made it, and me and my husband were like, "Holy shit, this is really good. Like, this is
Mm.
amazing. I've been making fun of my mom for like 40 years, and it's delicious." And so the way that I found my way back to my mom wasn't in the
Mm.
perfection of anything,
Mhm.
was in the reconnection and understanding of what cooking was to her and how it changed. And then I
Yeah.
went back, and my grandmother, she was orphaned, and then she didn't know how to drive. And so when her kids grew up and out of the door, she literally closed up her kitchen and was like, no, everyone's taking me out to eat because now I'm the queen and I'm done and I need to have
Yeah.
a social life. And so that had a different meaning for her. And my great grandmother, my abuelita, loved cooking. And she made buñuelos, and like she could make everything. And so it was like actually understanding the women in my life,
Yeah.
and then cook too. So I just that I happened to go down the like matrilineal line and reconnect myself to these women. And it was profound. I'm feeling it in a way that was really writing and nourishing for me. Like I
Yeah.
really like fed myself.
Oh, there's so much beauty in everything you just said. And I do want to emphasize that cooking, it's an interesting thing because it's a tool. Like many, we have many tools that we can care for ourselves, and cooking can become one of them in a really beautiful way. And and there's this reality that we have to feed ourselves. And often for working parents and people who, on budgets, there's a million different stressors that can make this process of cooking and feeding ourselves immensely stressful. And it becomes really a necessity as opposed to something that we can choose. I think there's an element, I just had a coaching call with a client who has two very young children, and she's struggling in the kitchen. And I emphasize that this is also a season of life. And
Mm,
we aren't going to take away that chaos. I wish I could give you a magic button and your kids would just be like, I'll eat whatever you want to make, mommy. It's like that chaos isn't going to go away. And are there ways that you can nourish yourself? Are
mm,
there ways that you can take the focus off of them and really give yourself, even if it's just, a cup of tea or one meal a day where it's for you? It's for you so that you can feed yourself.
mm,
And cooking is one way of doing that. But I just want to say this, that there are other ways of nourishing ourselves as well. For you, aside from cooking, which has fed you in really beautiful, unexpected ways, what are some ways that you nourish yourself?
mm.
Not necessarily through food.
It is individual, right? Healing
Yeah.
is individual, and all of these things are individual. So to make these blanket statements that, it just we can't really assume anything about anybody. But I continue to heal in the kitchen and
Yeah.
to also have stress in the kitchen. Like it's
Yeah.
also like that is,
Of course.
like none of this is, movie magic. It's just sort
Hmm.
of reality that does have great beauty in there as well. I love so much these words like nourish and feed because I think they are beautiful metaphors. And I feel like sometimes we don't realize how undernourished we are in different
Hmm.
capacities, right? Like
Yeah.
how thirsty we are for certain things. And so for me, actually it's interesting. It's people. I really, these
Mm.
circles of people really feed me. They really nourish me. Yeah, granted these are like friends and loved ones and chosen friends and chosen family, people that support,
Yeah.
you, that get you, that hear you, that see
Mm.
you. That, so much to be seen and heard and listened to and understood. I don't think we necessarily need it from the masses, but those that are close to us when
Yeah.
they really like in this conversation, like I feel like we're really getting each other, right? Like
Yeah.
it in fact does feed me. Like I
Yes.
really does. Like I feel more complete. I feel more energized. I'm sure it's doing something to my like, oxytocin and all of these,
Right.
hormones. Nature for me is always probably like my favorite balm. What's interesting actually what I found out, so I'll share. So part of the book and, this, I guess, just, I don't know, awakening, I guess I've been having in this this, whatever this new season of my life is, was studying Curanderismo, was studying, work of, my ancestors who are Mexican, right? Who are Aztec, Mexica. And so my ancestors who were Aztec, Mexica, or my lineage, they had this saying that the world was slippery slick, right? And they had
Mm.
this was like in Nahuatl. And I read that and I was like, that makes so much sense to me. I think especially because when I was in the throes of it, I felt very unsteady, right? I just, and this idea of the world being slippery slick, is that shit happens, right? That whether it's
Mm.
from you, right? We're very fallible. We're human. We're very like we do our best, but like we make 1,000 mistakes. We just it's
Yeah.
part of being human, right? And
Hmm.
people and also the world. The world is very slippery. A lot of things
Yeah.
happen that are really out of our control. So when I understood this like saying, I was like, "Oh, that makes sense." And when I did some more studying, there is a word that the Mexica had that was almost an antidote. It's called neltelitzli, and it means to be well rooted, right?
Mm.
And I was like, "Oh, I love this path." And it was not necessarily to be happy. It was
Hmm.
to be rich. It was to be well rooted. Like, how do you find your rooting on this slippery, slick path, right? What roots you? And so that's the question I think you're asking me. And it's a question
Yeah.
I ask people in my book, and I ask people all the time because it's going to be different. Like, right, what's in your medicine bag is different than what's in mine, right? Like,
Yeah.
you really, you root deeply because it feeds you. It makes sense to you with cooking and other things So mine, tend, like I said, be community and nature, my family, my husband, my children, reading, writing, like these things, they feed me deeply. What a professor found is that the Mexica did many things, right, to root. And just as many people as there are is going to be as many ways as there is.
Mm,
Somebody could
mm,
say dancing, right? Somebody could say singing. They could say like
yeah.
looking at birds.
Yeah.
But this one professor found that there was 4 specific ways, like overall, that he could see that the Mexica did relatively consistently. And I call those, this is me penning this name, the 4 paths to rootedness. And
Mm,
so the first one is embodiment, is to actually be in your body. And you've used this phrase coming back, right? I'm coming.
yeah.
And so I've always come back, right? So whether we read something that's really alarming, whether something happens with our kids or our life, we can have our like susto responses, like we could like, right? Like the flight.
Yeah. The reaction. Yeah.
And so there's always for me like a coming back, like, let me come back, let me come back. I'm here. I move out of my head, which has a lot of rumination, a lot of
Hmm.
worry for me, like what are they thinking? And I'm able to like actually inhabit and root into my body. And whether I do that through like dancing, like I ran this morning,
Hmm.
I was just present to my body. Like embodiment was always one that does work for me and is one that was followed, right? And the second path to rootedness that this professor found was it was almost a balance between the passions of the heart and like your intellect, right? And I feel like
Mm,
it's a hard balance because you want to be
yeah.
practical. You want to walk this path that makes sense. And then we have the yearnings of the heart. And so for the Mexica was like how to balance, right? What they
Yeah.
call the face and the heart. How do we balance these? And I feel like that makes good sense. For me, a lot of balance comes through kind of when I feel overwhelmed, I need to move things out. So I write, I take a long exhale, I do like what they call limpia. I'll get herbs and move them over my
Hmm.
body. Like I'm getting some things out. Anything time I'm overwhelmed, I want to usually move something out, over and out. The third path to rootedness is community, right? It's what we had talked about, like I was getting so much from you and other people because I don't know, like I enjoy being in community.
Yeah. Of
Right?
course.
Like community, like the root word of like commune, obviously means to be like, right? We
Hmm.
commune together, but it also means common. Like there's that definition of common. And what that means is that we're kind of equal, right?
Yeah.
Like just because you invited me on your podcast, like I'm equal as your guest, right? There's no like power dynamic. Like we're equal, right? And so we're able to walk among equals amongst each other. I think as women, we give a lot. This means that we should take in as well. We can ask for help. It's learning that
Mm,
reciprocity, which can be hard. But I
hmm.
feel like this balance of being in community, letting yourself be held, holding others, but really letting yourself be held, having that vulnerability of just being like, I don't got this. Like, I so fucking don't have this right now
Yeah.
is like that is huge.
Mm,
And the last path of rootedness is contemplating spirit, right? Understanding
mm,
why we're here. The Mexica held poetry, which they called flower songs, in great esteem. So, through nature, through poetry, sort of, I don't know, trying to like make sense of this slippery, slick world. So, those are
uh,
some things I can impart with people.
I just love that we're ending here because, first of all, the slippery slickness of life, like, oh, if we can just acknowledge that that is life, and that's okay. And that's okay because I think for people like you and me, we spent, a fair amount of time trying to control that and not make it slippery or slick. And it's like, no, it's going to be slippery and it's going to be slick, and that's okay. And then to end here with these tools for people who maybe aren't sure what getting rooted might feel like for them yet, these are pathways to explore and to, again, try on for yourself. And maybe one is a little, I think all four, I think all humans can resonate with, but there might be, the community aspect for you that's a little bit more powerful, or the embodiment aspect for somebody else. So to find your own way, I'm so grateful to have had you on and to share this conversation. Just like you, I feel so nourished. And I have no doubt that the people listening are going to feel that way too. I
Oh,
do have one more question for you, and this is just a fun one.
okay.
This is how I end every
Okay.
episode. And that is, if it were your last meal on earth in this moment, right now, a plate of food would appear at your desk, what would it be?
Oh, like nachos for sure.
Yes. Yes.
Not, I love nachos. It's all I could make in college. It is so sustaining to me in all of the ways. So it
Mm,
would absolutely be a plate of
I
nachos.
love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Robyn.
This was amazing. Thank you for nourishing me and for like making this like bounty and offering to all of your
Mm.
listeners. It is so received. So thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If this work resonates with you in any way, you can support it by leaving a review or comment or sharing it with friends. Also, you can sign up for the newsletter, Mind, Body, Spirit, Food. And by becoming a paid member for just $5 a month, you help fund this entire project. Thank you so much to all of you who are already subscribed, especially to those paid subscribers. This work could not happen without you. I'm Nikki Sizemore, and as always, remember to nourish yourself with intention and love.